When we talk about a just transition, we don't just mean the outcome of a fairer and greener future, but we also mean that the process that has to be undertaken is done in partnership with the people that it affects. How we get to net zero, a resilient economy for a climate-friendly future, how we do that is vitally important if we're going to deliver fairness and tackle inequality and injustice as we do it.
We've talked about loads of stuff, haven't we? And today we'll try and bring it all together and see how much sense and vision and commitment we can find in the words that we've passed between us. These events are a conversation. You're here as participants, not as an audience. Your job today is to share your experience and perspective and to seek those pathways to a safe, thriving and just future that we can walk down together. In COP26, we heard our Minister speak alongside other subnational leaders, demonstrating that leadership can be found in places of power. And we saw exactly the same thing being communicated in a different way by civil society on the streets outside. Different kinds of leadership and a different kind of power. 2.5 years on, that discourse is more urgent than ever. Scotland's Just Transition Plan for Construction and the Built Environment will be published later this year, and that desire to co-design our shared future has been at the heart of these days, where we've gathered together as government, industry and civil society. I am delighted to welcome Patrick Harvey, Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, to begin our conversation.
Now, you'll be aware that in the Scottish Government we believe it's critical that we take seriously our leadership role on climate, on net zero. You'll also be aware from the recent extremely stark warning from the UK Climate Change Committee that Scotland is not on track, certainly for the 2030 target. In my view, in the 15 years since we've had climate legislation and legally binding targets and political consensus around setting those targets, as a country, we have spent too long patting ourselves on the back for having ambitious targets and not enough time focused on the action that is necessary to meet those targets. We've now got a little over 20 years to go until the 2045 net zero ambition. And 2045 net zero is absolutely deliverable, but only if we reset and refocus now more on the accelerated action that is necessary in order to reach those targets. So over the course of the next weeks and months, I think you're going to have to see Scottish politics across the board, not just us in government, but the whole political spectrum, step up to that challenge and respond to the warnings that Chris Stark of the Climate Change Committee has given us.
With all of these sorts of events, it's really inspiring to hear the range of different perspectives, and it's inspiring to hear the actions that so many people are taking already to drive this agenda forward in Scotland. There are lots and lots of great positives to take away, stories about all sorts of actions from a very small individual level to community scale organisations, all the way up to what we've been hearing about in regulations in other countries in today's session. And we need action across all of these levels, and events like this can help support that action, that sharing of knowledge, that coming together of the community that's going to deliver the change that we require.
What does government need from the sector?
We just need the training, and I would say we need the training from industry, because that does depoliticise it.
There is demand for low carbon buildings, for retrofit, for shifting away from fossil fuels. But a lot of the people who could be that demand face barriers, whether it's knowing what to do, getting information that's trustworthy about the choices available to them, whether it's finance as a barrier, whether it's availability of skilled professionals. So essentially we need to try and unlock the demand that already exists there, and principally that means people being clear to me what the barriers are and how they can be removed. Some of that's difficult because it's about public money, and public money is tight at the moment, everyone's aware of that. But some of it is actually just about joining the dots and making sure people know where to go for the right information.
So in 2022, I was asked to write a report for Zero Waste Scotland with 3 of my colleagues on how Scotland could move towards introducing regulation of embodied carbon. And we set out many of the key decisions that would need to be made and the considerations that would have to be given to those, based on the experience of many of the other countries that have moved forward with this agenda so far. That report was referenced by Minister Harvey in a parliamentary question response just this month, but we've yet to see the recommendations from that report be implemented. I think it's now time. We've had 2 years since that report for the Scottish Government to move forward with this agenda.
I work for a local government, and I think I went into local government because I was very idealistic and I thought like I was going to be able to do good. While in theory, while in practice on everyday basis, I find myself really with my hands really tied, because like our procurement are absolutely terrible, and we just don't have the funds to do any good really. So yeah, we're doing minimum, absolute minimum dispensable.
Actually, is it more about being the ability to give agency to others? I think if we continue down the track of like, I need to have more power in my role to do this, it just kind of siloises us further without us even knowing. So actually by giving agency to others, it doesn't just become it's all in my court to like fix, but actually we kind of spread and create this network by actually giving agency away as opposed to holding on to it.
We're currently committed to allocating at least £1.8 billion through the Scottish Government over the course of this parliamentary session. And we've also committed to the development of a just transition plan for the built environment and construction sector. And that will provide greater certainty for businesses and communities on what the journey to net zero means in practice. And that will support in turn the investment decisions that are required to get beyond public funding, because we know that the scale of this challenge cannot be met with public funding alone. And if we get this right, we can ensure that we increase the flow of wider investment, see the innovation that will help us to reach this target and to do it in an efficient and a fair way, and also ensure that we share the maximum economic benefits for Scotland from doing that.
For over 10 years now, Glasgow City Council has led the Sustainable Glasgow Partnership, working on sustainability and wellness. Taking that forward, we are now working on building the city portrait, making sure that our impact on the planet does not further exacerbate the problems of climate change, but in fact leads us towards being a cleaner, better city that can be net zero carbon by 2030.
The portrait shows us how Glasgow might thrive sustainably. It downscales the ideas of donut economics to our local context and sets out our ambition to exist in the safe and just space for humanity, as well as some ideas for how we might get there.
The work of the City Portrait will really support the City Council's priorities around implementing and localising the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but it's also important to understand how we can best climate-proof the city, ensuring that those already most vulnerable are protected.
I think we have enough in place. We probably just need to join it up, but much more about who does that. You know, somebody needs to architect that or kind of be the conductor, I think. And I don't know who that is. Is it somebody else independent, or is it somebody coming from another country?
The Scottish Government to say, right, you are going to talk about this is what we want you to deliver as an output.
Are they a stakeholder who shouldn't be the, you know...
They're the ones with the money.
It just seems like, you know, whatever is the subject of all of those groups, we just keep on coming back to the same conclusion, that we need long-term framework and solutions.
Do you think we understand what role each of these different stakeholders have?
Not at all.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
There's a series of targets, there's a journey to go on over the next 20 years. And if we break that journey down a little bit, maybe people will start to get a little bit on board of, yeah, we can do that by year 3, year 5, year 7. That's I think the target's too big. Make it smaller, little steps.
That roadmap, if that roadmap is there, it will start to feel fair. And fairness is a basic principle in behaviour change. So without it, I think we're going to still struggle. With it, you can bring the people along. You will have more a preparedness to pay, a preparedness for behaviour shifts.
We are going to need to continue to challenge UK colleagues, whether the current government or a successor, on some of the changes on aspects like regulation of the energy system itself and pricing. We're going to need to continue to make that challenge because there are decisions that are also long overdue at UK level.
I mean, it always gets back to a 5-year political cycle. If there's no long-term thinking, this is long-term investment in education and health. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but it takes long-term thinking. And in a 5-year cycle, it doesn't happen.
How do we get long-term thinking? How do we embed that in?
Well, can you pull? I don't know. I'm not politically minded, but I mean, pull out some things from the mainstream political system. Can some things be taken out and given to committees and such like, and taken out? I don't know.
There does need to be a focused delivery plan where we have this holistic overview, because I don't see where leadership is, for instance, here.
I think the most important thing is that the Scottish Government decides to lead this. It's like the idea that you set a vision and then everybody else is meant to just somehow organically sort of drift into doing that is missing a really big gap. This is a very clearly a public policy. It's nothing to do, the thrust towards decarbonisation has not come from private profit. It's because we collectively have to make it happen. The Scottish Government has got us to a place where we all signed up to the idea, but it's failing to take the steps which say, this is the plan.
In the 4 days that we've spent here, looking in the mirror, as a construction built environment sector, contemplating our future and exploring pathways, we've found passion and vision, competence and knowledge, direction, insight, skill and love for our country, love for our fellow humans, love for nature, and love for the act of building a better future, which is, the heart beating somewhere deep within our 10,000 year history that we share of building as a people in Scotland. But we've also found fear, confusion, frustration, exhaustion, incompetence, disagreement, exclusion, and the debilitating love of wealth, status and power. And that's just me. You've all had your own personal experiences.
There is a global climate emergency. The evidence is irrefutable and the science is clear. How that translates into the decisions that need to be taken, that is where public deliberation can help. The good news is that concern about climate change is high in Scotland, and it's higher than the UK average. So people in Scotland are more likely to agree that we need to discuss climate action. Who do we trust? Scientific organisations and then scientists working at universities. They are way, way out in front of anybody else.
A few Horizon 2020 projects. One was a 3-year project looking at the barriers and enablers to moving from a linear to circular economy across 27 member states. This was when the UK was in, it finished just at the start of lockdown. And what were the policy recommendations to each 27 and the business recommendations? And it was a really progressive project. But then obviously when lockdown came and then we had coming out of the Brexit disaster of Brexit, but that's all opened back up again since January. So we've got opportunities now to do bids, not just from Scotland, but with other international partners.
international opportunities are great as well. It's actually getting down to like how can we connect more with like the people who are on the ground actually understanding the reality, as well as not just like the kind of policy sphere, but actually kind of those more kind of tangible learnings.
So the challenge here is really how to bring that trust and all that knowledge to the masses, if you like. Deliberative approaches are anything from a formal citizens' jury, where people actually make a judgment on an issue, to a way of facilitating a conversation in your community. But you give them access to expertise. They've been used on climate change quite extensively, both at the local and at the national level. And people, the participants, take it extremely seriously. People who have never had any involvement in these kind of issues before are all in. We got used to, during COVID, having scientists on the telly every day. I suppose that had some very positive impacts for science and for research. However, whether you agreed with it or not, stay at home was a fairly simple message. The message when it comes to climate change, and I think we've seen it here today. So what should I do in my home? There isn't a stay at home message. There isn't that kind of communication. We modelled emissions in relation to working from home. A lot of organisations said after COVID, incidentally, that they were going to let go of their office premises because it would reduce emissions if people worked from home. That isn't true in Scotland because of the state of our buildings. Because people who work from home will have fairly equivalent level of emissions from their home when they stop travelling. So there's, it evens out.
I really believe in the power of a retrofit plan. The lady there saying that, there's no kind of stay-at-home message for people when it comes to climate change in their homes, and I think there is. Get a retrofit plan. Start your journey. Let's talk about it. So my trajectory is, I think, I promised myself at the start of the year to actually just get in the room where this message isn't being heard more. So the next event I'm going to is the Heat Pump Summit in Oxford in a few weeks' time, because I feel like the fabric message isn't getting through on that side of things. I think all of us with that fabric message should be doing the same thing, selling the opportunity of it all, and I need to work out a way that I can get out of the office more to do that.
I think working for Network Rail Scotland, there's a lot of people with different priorities, and it's such a massive company. So I think my personal growth journey is to be the person in the room talking about sustainability, and to try and be in as many rooms as I can.
It's a privilege to be in the room like this when we all kind of speak the same language, and it's quite often a situation, I think, when I find myself in those kind of similar contexts, when you're preaching to the choir, because we're all here because we all agree. But I think as a personal challenge, coming back to my organisation, that's also huge, I work for a local government, is to try to engage with those people who maybe not necessarily disagree, but don't have the agency and the energy to be involved in those conversations.
Have you started to get the sense that more people are polarised on this, and that there's more kind of pushback and rejection? Because that seems to be true in the media, it seems to be true in politics.
I think there's something around other priorities have now just come to the fore, and I think we need to make sure that, I think it is the constant communication that keeps it front and centre, so that when people and also are supported to then say, right, I've got a bit more bandwidth, this is a priority again. I think there's something more about that, not that people don't think something has to happen. I think it's just a conflict of priorities.
I think people hear about it so often that they don't take notice of it as well, though. So we're kind of desensitised to hearing about it.
Being a baby boomer generation, I've more or less stopped talking to my equivalents about it because they can't stand it, they don't want to know, and I don't want to lose my friendships.
Fife Climate Hub is one of around 24 regional climate action hubs funded by the Scottish Government that are popping up currently. We're about increasing capacity and confidence of community groups to take practical climate action. We're offering training, advice, inspiration, funding and signposting to places of support. And we're just providing that opportunity for networking and collaboration to create a strong network across the region.
So even if we are more geographically focused, we still all come together to kind of cover a range of activities, everything from climate-friendly homes, so talking about the built environment a lot, to delivering things like carbon literacy.
We've seen communities being able to lead on local action as well as influence bigger picture through training, funding opportunities and collaborating.
We created the sort of training toolkit and workshop called Climate Place, which is all about thinking how can we empower communities to think about climate-friendly actions in their place.
We as an architecture practice have worked out our carbon footprint, so we know all our scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. It's quite an interesting exercise to go through just to see where you as a business are actually causing emissions. And then obviously being an architect, we can then start looking at our supply chains and deciding who we're going to work with. Are we only going to work with engineers, for example, who have emission levels below certain numbers, or that have so many women in their practices, or so I just think it's a method to start thinking about a bigger picture. Hopefully by 2045 we'll also be looking at negative emissions rather than just getting to net zero.
Big contractors want to see a river of money come towards them. They want to put up shit, have it fall down, and then put up shit again.
But maybe is the transformation then from the construction sector being about an industry that makes stuff to being one that's really circulating stuff. So it's about reusing and adapting. It's partly a waste management industry rather than a making new industry. COP26 then, it triggered a series of reflections and processes of inquiry for me and for the architectural practice that I am part of, which led to us redefining the purpose of what our organisation is. We no longer think of ourselves as makers of stuff, as architects whose purpose is to build as much as we can and defining our success by the total value of contracts on our books. We've redefined what for us is the purpose of being an architect in the 21st century to being really managers of that relationship between people and place.
I mean, the previous speakers are almost stolen my thunder because they're saying what we need to do. We need to connect more. We need to feel more empowered and have agency over our own inner development that catalyses our outer development. But how can we do that in a more coordinated way? And I think we need to have a permanent industry transition infrastructure. We need a systems approach because we're taking a reductionist approach, trying to do something in that little area that has an unintended consequence somewhere else within our industry or within our place. And I think the way that we can communicate around this can be much more positive as well. Instead of doom and gloom, we can be saying, well, actually, there's hundreds of billions of marketplace opportunities here in Scotland, in and from Scotland, for new business models and value propositions, products and services that transform where we live, work and play, a future-ready built environment. We built a platform where we're working with local authorities. It's free to join. We only just want to provide a space where you can digitally hang out and then physically hang out locally in Scotland, that we can do something in and from Scotland, with Scottish Government being involved, with all the agencies being involved, with business leadership there, with capital and citizens. Hi, I'm Doug Morwood. I'm the founder and CEO of Regenerative Futures. I'm here because I had to come. Somebody else told me about the conversation and I looked at it and I thought, yes, there is a conversation going on, but there is an intention about moving to action. And that's what we really need to see. So when I got in touch with Tom, had a few conversations with him, and I thought, right, I really want to support, not just attend, but support this really important discussion that that can then lead to implementation, lead to delivery, lead to action.
I'm getting louder, I'm getting angrier, I'm attending more demos, and it's embracing the chaos of all of that. And it's not just a movement, it's a life decision.
And we're talking about it's great, meeting everyone who's on the same page is great. Other than that, just start doing stuff and changing things already. So I've set up loads of organisations, I've changed our governance structure. We all work on a flat pay scale. We all try it. Let's just start doing as much as you can and don't let anyone tell you you can't.
Forget the importance of actually doing things. It's far more comfortable talking about it or getting paid to advocate for it or whatever, and we've lost the joy and the necessity of actually making things and making things well.
When you're in an emergency, you take drastic action. I think it was
what's it, the young guy from Anthropocene Architecture said, we haven't got the time. We've made the mistakes already. We've been talking about this, talking shop for 20 years, for instance, we declared there was a climate emergency. What are we doing about it? And every day we delay, we make it harder to deal with it. So we have to act, and we have to take these major steps, I think, radical steps, if you want to call it that. And there are lots of good people out there that can do it. We need to change the culture in this country. Okay, the Scots don't need enemies, they can fight amongst themselves, but we've got an opportunity here to do something. We were the first ones to say, turn around, we've got a climate emergency. Within the UK, we admitted to having a climate emergency.
So we see a sector that wants just transition to be systemically fed through procurement pipelines in order to raise the standards in a 20-year programme to 2045. This will enable the sector to strategically plan and implement the transition of its processes, materials and skills, minimising disruption and enabling secure financial investment into the sector. Delivering the just transition is going to be really hard, messy work that needs to be planned, programmed, funded, materials supplied, people are mobilised and upskilled. And this is exactly what the construction sector is used to doing. We're very much okay with rolling up our sleeves and figuring out complex problems and their solutions. So let's not make it overcomplicated, let's level the playing field and let's raise the standard for all procurement, set a programme and get on with it.
The process was really about having a conversation, because we think that what we need most are shared pathways that we can go on together and cohesion. We deliberately placed side by side these people that are in the decision-making rooms and the corridors of power right next to the people that are on the doorstep, delivering day to day, and just to try and see how much traction is there between those, where are the meeting points, and how far apart.
There's at least 4 actions that I've been able to take as a politician coming out of here. For example, just last week we had the renewal of our procurement for our doors and windows, and I was able to say, well, I'd like that procurement to include that the fitment is NFIT standard. And that's a change that's come out of this. So I think there's a lot of change that could go out, but one thing that we must do is get more politicians involved.
I think it's really important that we do get community leaders and technical people in the same room as policy people. We all know the lobbying power of the energy companies and the oil and gas industry. It's just important to get exposure to all the different points of view to make sure that policy is driven in the right direction and the right way. So I'd like to see lots more of these events where there's actually interaction with government and policymakers on the way to go, because I know that communities and small businesses are not getting the same opportunities to talk to policymakers that big businesses are. So yeah.
Imagine all these strings coming down from the ceiling, and this is kind of what our sector is like. We've got all these different threads of activity, these different organisations that you're involved in, and some of them, they're connecting the top down with the bottom up, and some of those, some of those are flapping about and really not doing very much work. And so what we've been trying to do in these days, in bringing diverse people together to talk about this stuff, is just give those ropes 5 kind of twist rounds so they start to get traction and turn into a single rope rather than separate strings, and how by sharing that and building traction between our different threads we can start to pull the future into today.
Scotland's never had anything like this. This is the very first of its kind in construction. Construction is far behind civil society, so for the fact that SEDA's got funding for this is incredible.
I think the real challenge is going from focus on all the things that we currently need to fix to coalescing around a very specific set of solutions and then getting on and acting them. Today we looked back to a discussion about what the pathways into the future are, and a lot of the core actions we need to take have remained the same for the last 10 years, but we haven't taken them. It's not necessarily just about bringing the community together, but coalescing around the actions that can be taken away and implementation of those. You can never judge the impact of something at the point at which it finishes. Most of the impact comes way after. So we'll need to see in the fullness of time what the impacts of these kinds of conversations are, any seeds that have been sown in people's minds, and any collaborations that stem from the conversations that we've had over these past 5 days.